All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on one of ARIA's most powerful, but maybe most misunderstood roles. Role equals presentation. It's a fantastic tool for sure, but you've got to know exactly how and when to use it, or things can get a little weird.
So picture this. You've built out this beautiful component, right? But the HTML structure you used, maybe with lists or tables for layout, is now just creating a bunch of noise for screen reader users. So how do you tell that screen reader, hey, ignore the meaning of these tags, but please, whatever you do, don't hide the important stuff inside them? That is the exact problem we're going to solve.
And the answer, of course, is role equals presentation. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a semantic mute button. When you add it to an element, you're signaling to assistive tech, look, this tag here, it's just for show. Ignore its job, its role, but make sure you read all the text that's inside. It just yanks that element's semantics right out of the accessibility tree.
Oh, and a quick heads up, if you ever see role equals none out there in the wild, don't let it throw you. The ARIA 1.1 spec says it's just a synonym. It does the exact same thing as role equals presentation.
Okay, so we know what it is, but how does the so-called mute button actually work under the hood? Let's get into the nitty-gritty, the rules of presentation. It really boils down to two main things. First, it hides the element's built-in ARIA role. So a UL stops being a list, a table stops being a table, you get the idea. But second, and this is the crucial part, it keeps all the content, all the text inside that element and its children totally visible to the screen reader. Remember, it mutes the container, not the content. Now here's where it gets really interesting. This role doesn't just affect the one element you stick it on. It can actually get passed down to its children, but only in very specific situations. Let's use a classic example to see how this works. Say you put role equals presentation on an unordered list, a UL tag. Well, since LI elements are what we call required children, they don't really make sense without the UL, they automatically inherit that presentational role. Poof, they're no longer announced as list items. But the key is anything inside those list items, text, a link, whatever, is still perfectly accessible. And this slide just nails that transformation. On the left, there's our code, a list with the role on it. But on the right, that's what the assistive technology actually hears. The whole list structure is gone. To the screen reader, it's as if they were just plain, unstructured divs. The structure gets flattened, leaving only the good stuff, the content. Okay, theory is great and all, but where are you actually going to use this thing in your day-to-day work? Let's run through 3 super common use cases. First up, decorative images. This one's a no-brainer. If you've got an image that's just there for visual flair, like a swoosh or a background texture, you can use role equals presentation. It does the exact same thing as an empty alt attribute, alt equals empty. It just tells the screen reader, nothing to see here, move along. Second, and this is a big one, especially for legacy code, layout tables. If you're using a table just to arrange things on the page and not for actual data, all those row, column, and cell announcements are super confusing. Slap a role equals presentation on that table and you strip all that away, so a layout table doesn't get announced like a data table. And the third big use case is for building more complex custom widgets, like a tab interface. For a tab system to be understood correctly, a tab needs to be inside a tab list. Sometimes people use a UL and LI structure to build that, but the list item role gets in the way. By putting role equals presentation on the LI, we make it semantically disappear, creating that clean structure the widget needs to work. Okay, now for the really important part. This is where a lot of developers get tripped up. That semantic mute button, it isn't foolproof. There are some very specific times when the browser will just completely ignore it. So, does this mute button always work? Can you just throw it on anything? The answer is a hard no, and you absolutely need to know the exceptions. The mute button breaks in 2 main situations. First, if the element is focusable. That means it's something like a link or a button, or you've given it a tab index. The browser basically says, hey, if a user can tab to this, it has to have a role. I'm not hiding it. Second, if the element has global ARIA attributes, like ARIA label. Again, the browser steps in to prevent important info from getting lost. Now, for one last really cool thing about this role. What if I told you that sometimes you don't even need to use it? Some other ARIA roles are so specific
They apply this muting effect for you automatically. And the reason why comes down to how these things are built in the first place. Certain components, like a button, just can't have semantic children. A button can have text, sure, but it can't have a heading inside of it. So to deal with that, ARIA just says, okay, browsers, for these specific roles, automatically make everything inside them presentational. And here's the list of those roles. You'll see a lot of common ones: button, checkbox, radio, slider, tab. It makes a ton of sense when you think about it. These are all supposed to be single, self-contained controls. A user expects to hear a button, not a button that contains a heading. So to keep things clean, any semantic children just get muted by default. This example makes it crystal clear. If you stick a heading, like an H2, inside an element that has role equals tab, that heading's meaning just vanishes. To a screen reader, it's not a heading anymore. It's just text inside the tab. The H2 basically gets an automatic role equals presentation applied to it. Pretty cool, right?
Whew, okay, we've covered a lot. So let's boil it all down. What are the absolute key things you need to walk away with?
First, its whole purpose is to be that semantic mute button. It hides a role, not the content. Second, don't forget about inheritance. It gets passed down to required children, like from a list to its items. Third, watch out for the exceptions. It gets ignored on anything focusable or with global ARIA attributes. And finally, remember that some roles, like button and tab, do all this muting for you automatically.
And that's a wrap. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. The next time you're writing some code, take a second and ask yourself, where is my HTML structure adding more noise than value? Where in your code is a semantic mute button desperately needed?